The story of Rome, a city that would grow into an empire and define the Western world, does not begin with a senate or a triumphant legion. It begins with a myth, a dark and epic tale of two brothers. These were Romulus and Remus, twins born of a forbidden union with a god, abandoned to a river at birth, and miraculously saved and nurtured by a she-wolf. Theirs is a story of fated destiny and fierce ambition, a journey from a wild riverbank to a king's throne. But it is also a story of a tragic and foundational betrayal, culminating in an act of fratricide that would forever consecrate the city's first walls with a brother's blood. This is their foundational epic. Our story begins in the long, mythic past of the Italian peninsula, in a time before Rome was even a dream. High in the Alban hills, overlooking the fertile plains of Latium, stood the ancient and proud city of Alba Longa. For generations, it had been the mother city of the Latin people. Its kings descended from the great Trojan hero Aeneas himself. Its halls were of ancient stone, its people were hardy shepherds and farmers, and its throne was meant to be a seat of justice and of divine lineage. But in the halls of power, the bonds of brotherhood are often the first casualties of ambition. The rightful king of Alba Longa was Numitor, a just and gentle ruler. But his younger brother, Amulius, was a man of a different and far more dangerous character. He was a man consumed by a cold and burning jealousy, a man who had spent his life in the shadow of his older brother, and who saw the crown not as a sacred duty, but as a prize to be taken. In a swift and brutal coup, Amulius seized power. He did not merely depose his brother, he sought to obliterate his line. He had Numitor's sons murdered in the dark of the night, and had the old king himself exiled to a quiet and powerless life in the countryside. With the male heirs eliminated, only one threat to Amulius's illegitimate rule remained: Numitor's daughter, the Princess Rhea Silvia. To kill her would be to risk the wrath of the gods and the anger of the people. And so, Amulius devised a solution of a far more cold and brilliant cruelty. He would not take her life, he would take her future. He declared that Rhea Silvia, in her great piety, would be granted the highest honor a woman of Alba Longa could receive. She was to become a Vestal Virgin, a sacred priestess of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and of the home. It was an honor that was, in reality, a life sentence. Let us imagine the solemn and tragic ceremony. The young princess, her heart filled with a silent and unspeakable grief for her murdered brothers and her exiled father, is led to the circular temple of Vesta. Her royal robes are taken from her, and she is dressed in the simple, pure white linen of a priestess. Her hair is cut, and she takes the sacred and unbreakable vow to serve the goddess for 30 years, and in that time to remain a virgin. Her bloodline, the royal bloodline of Numitor, was now destined to end with her. The eternal sacred flame in the heart of the temple, which she was now sworn to tend, was a constant and mocking reminder of the family hearth that she would never have. Rhea Silvia accepted her fate with a quiet and dignified resignation. Her life became one of deep and profound silence, a steady and unchanging rhythm of sacred rituals and of quiet contemplation. But the gods, it is said, have their own plans, and the threads of fate cannot be so easily cut by the cruel shears of a mortal king. One day, as the princess went to a sacred grove to draw water for a temple ritual, a strange and powerful drowsiness overcame her. She lay down in the soft, cool grass, in the dappled shade of the trees, and she fell into a deep and profound sleep. And in this sleep, the legends say, she was visited by a divine and powerful presence. It was the great and terrible god, Mars, the god of war, of passion, and of the wild, untamed spirit of Rome itself. The encounter was not gentle. It was a divine and overwhelming force of nature, a thunderclap in the quiet sanctuary of her life. When she awoke, she was alone, but she knew that her life and the destiny of her people had been irrevocably changed. In the months that followed, she tried to hide the impossible truth, her terror growing with each passing day. For she, a sworn and sacred virgin of the goddess Vesta, was now with child. To break this vow was the greatest of all sacrileges, a crime for which the punishment was to be buried alive. In a secret and hidden chamber, in a state of profound and terrified isolation, she gave birth, and the divine intervention of the god was made clear. For she did not bear one child, but two. They were twin boys, and they were impossibly strong, beautiful, and full of a vibrant and almost divine life. She named them Romulus and Remus, but such a secret could not be kept for long. The news of the birth reached the ears of her uncle, the king Romulus. His rage was a cold and terrible thing. The prophecy that he had tried so hard to prevent, the continuation of his brother's bloodline, had come to pass, and it had done so through a direct and undeniable intervention of the gods. He did not dare to directly kill the children of a god himself, but he could let the forces of nature do the work for him. He summoned a servant and gave his final terrible order. The twin infants were to be taken, to be placed in a small basket, and to be cast into the great and swirling waters of the river Tiber, to be washed away and forgotten by the world forever. The bloodline was to be ended, this time for good. The decree of the usurper king, Romulus, was absolute, a cold and final word spoken in the halls of power in Alba Longa. The twin infants, the secret and divine sons of Rhea Silvia and the god Mars, were a living embodiment of the prophecy he had tried so hard to prevent. Their very existence was a threat to his illegitimate crown, and their continued life was a risk he was unwilling to take. The order was given, a simple and terrible command whispered to a loyal servant. The children were to be taken to the river Tiber and drowned, their divine bloodline extinguished forever in the cold and muddy waters. Let us imagine the servant, a man whose name history has not remembered, as he carries out his grim and sorrowful task. He is a man bound by a lifetime of loyalty to the throne, but his heart is a heavy stone in his chest. In a small, rustic and crudely made wooden trough, the kind used for watering animals, the two infants lie sleeping. They are wrapped in simple cloths, their faces serene and perfect in the innocence of their slumber, completely unaware of the terrible fate that has been decreed for them. As the servant carries them from the palace, he can feel the warmth of their small bodies. He can hear their soft and steady breathing, and every step he takes is an argument between his duty and his conscience. He makes his way to the banks of the river Tiber. On this day, the river is not the calm and placid waterway that usually flows through the Alban hills. The winter snows have melted in the mountains, and the spring rains have been heavy. The Tiber is in full flood, a great, churning and powerful torrent of muddy brown water that has overflowed its banks and turned the low-lying fields into a vast and shallow lake. The main current is a raging and chaotic force, a violent and irresistible power that tears at the trees on its banks and carries great, splintered logs and debris in its powerful embrace. The king's command was to drown the children. A simple and easy task in such a flood. A single, quick toss into that central, raging current would be the end of it. The small trough swallowed instantly by the angry and powerful water. But the servant hesitates. To commit such a direct and violent act, to be the hand that sends these two perfect sleeping infants to their immediate and certain doom, is a horror that his own simple soul cannot bear. He looks at the raging current, and he looks at the two innocent faces, and in that moment he makes a small and quiet decision that will alter the course of human history. He will not throw them into the heart of the flood. He will obey the letter of the king's command, but not its brutal spirit. He wades into the calmer, shallower floodwaters at the very edge of the newly formed lake, to a place where the current is a gentle and almost imperceptible thing. And here, with a quiet prayer and a heavy heart, he gently places the small wooden trough upon the surface of the water. He gives it a final, gentle push, and he watches as it begins to drift, a tiny, fragile and utterly helpless vessel, upon the vast and indifferent expanse of the flood. He has done his duty. The children have been committed to the river. Their fate is now in the hands of the gods. And he turns and walks away, the image of the small, drifting cradle forever seared into his memory. And so begins the first and most perilous journey of Romulus and Remus. The small, wooden trough floats for a time on the calm, shallow water where it was left. But then, a gentle and insistent current begins to catch it, and it is pulled, slowly at first, and then with a growing speed, out towards the main and powerful channel of the flooding river. Let us follow this small and fragile vessel as it is caught by the great and swirling torrent. It is a journey of constant and terrible peril. A great, uprooted tree, its branches like grasping skeletal arms, rolls past, missing the small trough by only a few miraculous inches. A swirling and powerful eddy catches the basket and spins it around and around, threatening to capsize it, but then, just as suddenly, another current catches it and pulls it back onto a straight and steady path. The legend tells that this was no accident. The great and ancient god of the river, Tiber himself, had risen from his watery home. He saw the sacred divine children of the great god Mars, and he would not allow them to perish in his domain. He guided the small and humble vessel with his own, unseen and watery hands. He commanded the currents to be their gentle and protective guardians. He steered them away from the dangers of the flood, and he carried them on a safe and fated path. As the day wears on, the great flood begins to recede. The power of the river lessens, its angry and chaotic roar softening once more to a gentle murmur, and the small wooden trough, its perilous journey through the main channel now over, is carried by the last of the receding waters to a soft and muddy bank at the foot of a small hill, the future Palatine Hill of Rome. Here, in the shelter of a great and ancient wild fig tree, the Ficus ruminalis, a tree that would forever be held as sacred, the cradle comes to a gentle and final rest, its small occupants now safe upon the land once more. The two infants, their long and strange journey over, now begin to awaken, and they do what all infants do when they are alone and hungry. They begin to cry. Their small, thin, and surprisingly powerful wails fill the quiet air of the deserted riverbank, a sound of pure and simple and helpless need. And this sound travels. It travels into the deep and shadowy woods that cover the surrounding hills, and it is heard. A creature, drawn by the sound, now emerges from the shadows of the forest. It is a she-wolf, a lupa, but let us not imagine her as a common, hungry animal. The legends say that she was a great and magnificent creature, larger and fiercer than any other of her kind, her fur thick and grey, her eyes are deep and intelligent, almost golden yellow. She is a wild and powerful predator, a mother who has perhaps just lost her own cubs, her heart a strange and potent mixture of grief and of a fierce maternal instinct. And she is an animal that is sacred to the god Mars, the very father of the two, crying infants. She approaches the basket with a slow and cautious grace, her movements silent on the soft, wet earth. The infants, seeing this great and wild creature, this vision of fur and of sharp teeth, do not fall silent with fear. They only continue to cry, their need for succor greater than any other instinct. And the great she-wolf, who should see these small, helpless creatures as nothing more than an easy and unexpected meal, is overcome by a force that is older and more powerful than her own predatory nature. A deep and primal maternal instinct rises within her. She does not attack. Instead, she does something miraculous. She lies down upon the damp earth beside the small wooden trough, and with a gentle and almost tender nudge of her great and powerful nose, she pushes the infants, as if to comfort them. And then, this great and wild creature of the forest, this powerful and dangerous hunter, offers herself to them. She allows the two small human infants to nurse from her, to take the rich and life-giving milk that was meant for her own lost pups. And so, the most famous and most beautiful and most iconic scene in all of Roman mythology is born. The two abandoned divine children, the future founders of the greatest empire the world would ever know, are saved, not by a human, but by the wild and gentle mercy of a she-wolf. They are safe, they are warm, and they are fed, And the legends also say that another of Mars's sacred creatures, a red-crested woodpecker, also heard their cries, and it would fly down from the trees and would bring them small morsels of food, berries and grubs, to further sustain them. Let us now rest in this image of profound and impossible peace. The two small human infants, sleeping now with full bellies, are curled up against the warm and furry body of their new, wild and powerful mother. A great and beautiful she-wolf, her head resting on her paws, her golden eyes watchful and alert, stands as their fierce and loving guardian. And in the branches of the fig tree above, a sacred woodpecker keeps its own, silent and patient watch. This is a holy and a magical tableau, a perfect and beautiful dream of a world where the boundaries between the human and the animal, between the wild and the divine, have been dissolved. It is a miracle, but it is a miracle that cannot last forever, and this strange and beautiful, wild and sacred family is now simply waiting, in the quiet of the riverbank, for the next human chapter of this great and unfolding story to begin. The miracle on the riverbank, that strange and sacred tableau of the human infants and their wild animal guardians, could not last forever. It was a perfect and timeless moment of divine intervention, a secret held between the river, the forest, and the gods. But the world of men was destined to find its way back into the story, and so it did, in the form of a simple, kind-hearted shepherd named Faustulus. Faustulus was not just any shepherd. He was the chief shepherd of the royal herds, the man entrusted with the flocks of the very king, Romulus, who had ordered the twins' death. Let us imagine him now, on a warm and sunlit afternoon, walking the low, green hills that slope down towards the river Tiber. He is searching for a lost ewe, his steps slow and his eyes sharp, scanning the landscape with the patient and practiced gaze of a man who has spent his entire life reading the subtle language of the land. His search leads him down towards the river, to the place where the great fig tree, the Ficus ruminalis, stands as a silent and ancient sentinel. And as he draws closer, he hears a strange and unfamiliar sound, the soft and contented gurgling of two human infants. He moves forward, his heart a mixture of curiosity and of apprehension, and then he stops, frozen in a state of pure and utter amazement. For there, at the foot of the great fig tree, he sees the scene that will forever be burned into his memory, a scene that he knows, with an immediate and bone-deep certainty, is a powerful and sacred omen. He sees the two, perfect and beautiful male infants, lying on a bed of soft leaves, and standing over them, as a quiet and watchful guardian, is a great and magnificent she-wolf. He watches from a hidden place as the great wolf, with a gentle and almost maternal tenderness, licks the children clean, and as a small, red-crested woodpecker flies down from a branch to drop a small, wild berry near their mouths. Faustulus is a simple man, but he is a man of his time, a man who knows that the world is full of gods and of portents. He does not see a scene of danger. He sees a scene of a clear and undeniable divine protection. He knows in that single and profound instant that these are no ordinary children. He waits with a patient and reverent stillness until the she-wolf, her duty done for the moment, melts back into the shadows of the forest. And then the shepherd approaches. He looks down at the two infants, who look up at him with clear, bright and unafraid eyes, and his heart is filled with a compassion that is stronger than any fear of the king's wrath. He gently gathers them up, wrapping them in his own rough woolen cloak, and he carries them home. His home is a simple, rustic and humble hut, its walls made of wattle and daub, its roof a thick and heavy thatch, but it is a place of warmth, of safety, and of a simple, honest love. He brings the two infants to his wife, Acca Laurentia, a woman whose own heart is as kind and as sturdy as her husband's. She looks upon the two, abandoned children, and she does not ask any questions of their origin. She simply sees two small and helpless lives that need her care, and her own simple maternal heart opens to them completely. And so the two divine and royal infants, born in a palace and condemned to a river, find their first true home, not in a place of power, but here, in the humble and loving warmth of a shepherd's hearth. They raise the boys as their own, and they give them the simple, strong names of Romulus and Remus. Faustulus, in his heart, suspects the truth of their origin. He has heard the quiet and fearful whispers from the palace, the story of the Vestal Virgin's disgrace and the disappearance of her twin sons. He knows that he is holding a secret that is as precious and as dangerous as fire, and so he tells no one. He and his wife guard this secret as fiercely as the she-wolf guarded the children themselves, and the boys grow. They do not grow like the other common shepherd boys of the surrounding hills. They seem to have been blessed by the gods, and by the rich and powerful milk of their first lupine mother. They grow with a speed, a strength, and a grace that sets them apart from all others. They are taller, faster, and more powerful than any boy of their own age. Their bodies are hardened by a life lived in the open air, by the sun and the wind and the rain. Their days are spent in the simple, ancient, and rhythmic work of the shepherd's life. They learn to lead the flocks to the high, green pastures in the summer, and to find the sheltered southern slopes in the cold of the winter. They learn the names of the stars that they use to navigate in the dark. They learn to read the weather in the shape of the clouds, and they learn to be the fierce and brave protectors of their flocks. It is here, in the defense of their sheep, that their true and innate nature begins to reveal itself. Let us imagine them as young men now, their bodies lean and powerful, honed by years of active outdoor life, and their eyes sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. A pack of hungry wolves, the wild and common cousins of their own miraculous wet nurse, descends from the hills to attack their flock, their howls echoing ominously through the valley. While other shepherds might run in fear, abandoning their charges, Romulus and Remus do not hesitate for an instant. They stand their ground, back to back, their simple wooden shepherd's crooks held not as tools for guiding, but as formidable weapons. They are a perfect and formidable team, each instinctively knowing the other's movements. Romulus, the more thoughtful and strategic of the two, directs their defense, his keen mind assessing the best angles of attack and defense, while Remus, the more impulsive and ferocious, is the first to leap into the fray, a whirlwind of raw power. Their courage is a thing of such pure and natural power that it inspires the other shepherds, who, emboldened by the twins' bravery, join the fight, and together they drive the snarling predators away, securing their flock. They are not just shepherds, they are warriors born, their very essence imbued with the spirit of combat, and they are natural and charismatic leaders of men, drawing others to their cause with an almost magnetic pull. The other young shepherds of the region are drawn to them, to their undeniable strength, to their unwavering confidence, and to their innate and almost royal authority that commands respect without a single word. Romulus and Remus organize these young men into two distinct bands, each unit mirroring the twins' own complementary strengths, and they begin to take on a new and more active, indeed, almost governmental role in their small and rustic world. They are no longer merely the defenders of their own flocks. They become the self-appointed, vigilant guardians of the entire region, a bulwark against the encroaching chaos. The hills of Latium, once a pastoral idyll, are plagued by bandits, by desperate and lawless men who hide in the dense forests and who prey without mercy upon the hard-working shepherds, stealing their vital livestock. Romulus and Remus, with a righteous fury, declare an unyielding war on these marauders. Their raids are swift, executed with clever tactics and precise timing, and always, without fail, successful. They hunt the hunters with relentless determination, recovering the stolen goods, which they then distribute fairly amongst all the other shepherds, ensuring that justice, in their rough and simple form, prevails in a world otherwise devoid of law. Their reputation begins to grow exponentially, spreading like wildfire throughout the Alban hills. They are known, revered, and sometimes feared as the sons of the wolf, a testament to their miraculous origins and their untamed spirit. They are the brave and charismatic twin leaders of the shepherds, the ones who are fearless in the face of any danger, no matter how great. But in the midst of this growing power and this shared and heroic life, a subtle yet significant difference in their characters begins to emerge, a nascent crack in their unified front. Romulus is the more serious, the more thoughtful of the two. He is the natural planner, the meticulous strategist, the one who sees the larger picture, contemplating the long-term consequences of their actions. Remus is more light-hearted, more impulsive, quicker to laugh, but also, alarmingly, quicker to anger, a volatile spark in their carefully constructed world. For now, their two different natures are a perfect and complementary strength, balancing each other's excesses. But one day, this inherent difference, this fundamental divergence in their spirits, will become the tragic and fatal flaw in their great and epic story, leading to an inevitable, heartbreaking clash. Their growing power and their bold and increasingly successful raids on the bandits, however, are now beginning to cause a new and dangerous friction with forces far beyond the immediate region. For in one of their most daring raids they recover a great herd of stolen cattle. But these cattle do not belong to the simple, local shepherds they have sworn to protect. They belong to the royal herds, the very flocks that were once tended by their grandfather, the now deposed King Numitor, and now held by his usurping brother, Romulus. And the royal shepherds of Numitor, angry at what they see as the arrogance and presumptuousness of these two, young upstarts interfering with royal affairs, decide to lay a cunning trap. The quiet, simple, and pastoral idyll of the twins' youth is about to be violently shattered, replaced by the harsh realities of power and political intrigue. A small and seemingly insignificant quarrel over a few stolen cattle is about to become the accidental and unwitting trigger that will finally unveil the great and dangerous secret of their own, royal and divine birth, irrevocably altering their destiny and setting them on a direct and violent collision course with the tyrannical king of Alba Longa, a collision that will reshape the very foundations of their world. The quiet, pastoral idyll of the shepherd's life was not destined to last. The twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, now grown into young men of formidable strength and charismatic authority, had become the undisputed leaders of the hills. Their reputation as the fearless sons of the wolf had spread throughout the region, a reputation that brought them the loyalty of the downtrodden and the enmity of the powerful. The small and localized war they had declared on the bandits of the countryside, while just, had begun to attract the wrong kind of attention. The dispute over the cattle recovered from the royal herds of Numitor had festered, and the old king's herdsmen, feeling their own authority challenged by these audacious young shepherds, were now determined to teach them a lesson. The quiet and simple world of the twins was about to be shattered, and the great and dangerous secret of their birth was about to be violently and dramatically brought into the light. The moment came during the festival of the Lupercalia, an ancient and wild, pastoral celebration held in honor of the fertility god, Lupercus. It was a time of youthful and chaotic revelry, of feasting and of games. The young shepherds of the region, led by the two brothers, were celebrating with a raw and boisterous energy. It was in the midst of this joyful and unguarded chaos that the trap was sprung. The herdsmen of Numitor, lying in a carefully planned ambush, launched a surprise attack. In the confusion of the sudden and violent raid, the brothers were separated. Romulus, the more formidable and perhaps more cautious of the two, fought with a fierce and powerful clarity, and he managed to break through the ambush and to escape. But Remus, ever the more impulsive and the more reckless, was surrounded. Overwhelmed by sheer numbers, he was captured, his hands bound, a triumphant prize for his captors. He was not, however, dragged to the court of the reigning king, Romulus. He was instead taken to the quiet and secluded estate of the deposed king, Numitor, to be judged for his crimes against the old king's property and his men. It was a simple act of local justice that would, through a profound and beautiful twist of fate, become the key that would unlock the entire, forgotten history of a royal bloodline. Let us now imagine the scene. Numitor is an old man, His life for the past 40 years a long and quiet study in grief and in powerlessness. He lives in a state of gilded exile, his spirit broken by the murder of his sons and the forced seclusion of his daughter all those years ago. And now, a young and defiant shepherd, the leader of a troublesome local gang, is dragged before him. But as Numitor looks upon the captive youth, he is not filled with the anger and the indignation of a man whose property has been stolen. He is struck by a sudden and profound sense of an almost impossible familiarity. He sees in the young man's proud and unbroken posture, in his fierce and noble gaze, not the bearing of a common shepherd, but the unmistakable and unconscious authority of a king. He sees in the lines of the young man's face, in the colour of his eyes, an uncanny and heart-stopping resemblance to his own beloved and long-lost daughter, Rhea Silvia. The old king's heart, which had been a cold and heavy stone for decades, begins to feel a faint and almost painful flicker of a wild and improbable hope. He dismisses his herdsman and he begins to question the young captive. His voice is gentle, his questions full of a quiet and searching curiosity. He asks Remus of his origins, of his family. Remus, who believes himself to be the simple son of the shepherd Faustulus, can tell him little. But he speaks of his twin brother Romulus. He speaks of their strange and miraculous discovery as infants. And as Numitor listens to this story, and as he compares the young man's age to the number of years that have passed since his own, infant grandsons were ordered to be drowned in the Tiber, the impossible hope in his heart begins to transform into a staggering and overwhelming certainty. He is not looking at a common criminal. He is looking at his own flesh and blood. He is looking at the son of his lost daughter. He is looking at the rightful heir to the throne of Alba Longa. While this quiet and momentous revelation is taking place in the house of Numitor, the other half of the great secret is being unveiled in the humble hut of the shepherd Faustulus. Romulus, having escaped the ambush, is now gathering his band of shepherds, his heart burning with a fierce and simple desire to rescue his captive brother. But Faustulus, the old shepherd who has been his father for all these years, now knows that the time for secrets is over. He sees that the great and dangerous hand of destiny, which he has tried to outrun for so long, has finally caught up with him. He takes Romulus aside, and in a voice that is thick with the emotion of a lifetime of hidden knowledge, he finally tells him everything. He tells him the story of that fateful day on the riverbank, of the miraculous scene of the she-wolf and the woodpecker. He shows him the small wooden trough in which he found the two infants, a humble and yet powerful piece of physical proof that he has kept hidden for all these years. He tells Romulus of the quiet and fearful whispers that he had heard from the palace at the time, the whispers of the disgrace of the Vestal Virgin, Rhea Silvia, and of the twin sons of the god Mars, who had been condemned to the river by the cruel king Amulius. "I have always believed," the old shepherd confesses, his eyes full of tears and of a deep and abiding love, "that you are not my son, but the grandson of the good King Numitor, and that the blood of both kings and of gods flows in your veins." Romulus listens to this incredible story, and he is not filled with disbelief. He is filled with a sudden and brilliant and almost blinding sense of clarity. His entire life, all the strange and powerful feelings that had always set him apart, his unnatural strength, his innate and charismatic leadership, his deep and unspoken sense of a greater destiny, all of it now makes a perfect and profound sense. The story of the old shepherd is the key that has just unlocked the great and secret door of his own true identity. He is not the son of a wolf. He is the son of a god and the grandson of a king. And in that moment of profound and powerful revelation, his simple and personal desire to rescue his brother is transformed into a great and epic purpose. He will not just rescue Remus, he will reclaim their birthright, he will overthrow the cruel usurper, and he will restore their grandfather to his rightful throne. He goes to his small and loyal army of shepherds, and he tells them the entire incredible story. And they, who have always seen in him a leader who is more than just a common man, believe him without question. Their loyalty to their charismatic leader is now transformed into the sworn and feudal loyalty to their one, true, and newly revealed king. The plan for the overthrow of Alba Longa is one of a swift and brilliant simplicity. Remus, having now been told the truth by his grandfather, Numitor, begins to secretly rally support from within the city, his own charisma a powerful and persuasive force. And Romulus, with his small but fiercely loyal army of shepherds, will attack from without. It is a two-pronged assault, an uprising from within and an invasion from without. The fall of the tyrant Amulius is swift, just, and absolute. The people of Alba Longa, who have suffered under his cruel and illegitimate rule for 40 years, rise up in support of the two long-lost princes. The palace guards, seeing that the will of both the people and the gods has turned against their master, throw down their weapons. Romulus and his shepherds storm the palace, and in the great and ancient throne room, Romulus comes face to face with the man who had ordered his death as an infant. There is no long and dramatic battle. There is only the swift and final justice of the sword. The usurper is killed, and his long and tyrannical reign is brought to a sudden and bloody end. The great and ancient prophecy has been fulfilled. The two brothers, Romulus and Remus, the sons of the god, the grandsons of the king, have returned. They march in triumph through the streets of Alba Longa, and they formally restore their grandfather, the good King Numitor, to his rightful throne. But the two young men, who have grown up as the free and powerful leaders of the wild hills, are not content to be mere princes in another man's kingdom, even that of their own beloved grandfather. Their own great and powerful destiny is calling to them. Their gaze and their hearts now turn back to the 7 gentle hills by the great river Tiber, the place of their miraculous salvation, the place where they will not be princes, but where they will be kings, and where they will build a city of their own. The prophecy of Alba Longa had been fulfilled. The usurper king, Amulius, was dead, and the rightful and gentle king, Numitor, was restored to his throne, his two magnificent and powerful grandsons standing at his side. The city celebrated the return of its true royal line, and for a time it seemed that Romulus and Remus might be content to live as princes, as the honored heroes of their ancestral home. But the two young men, who had been raised in the wild freedom of the hills, whose first army had been a band of loyal and rugged shepherds, were not made for the quiet and ordered life of a court. The divine blood of Mars that flowed in their veins was a restless and ambitious fire, and the destiny that the gods had set for them was not to be mere princes, but to be the founders and the kings of their own new city. With their grandfather's blessing, they announced their intention to return to the land that had first nurtured them, to the 7 gentle hills that stood by the great river Tiber, the very place where the river's current had so miraculously delivered them from death. This was their sacred ground, and it was here that they would build their kingdom. They led their band of loyal followers, the shepherds and the adventurous young men who had helped them take Alba Longa, on the journey back to their homeland. But as they stood upon the green and pastoral hills, looking out over the winding silver ribbon of the river, the perfect and powerful unity that had always existed between the two twin brothers began to show its first, faint and tragic cracks. For a simple and yet profound question now stood between them. A new city must have a king, but which of them was it to be? They were twins, equals in age, in strength, in courage, and in their divine and royal lineage. Neither would consent to be the subject of the other. Their different natures, which had once been a complementary strength, now became a source of a quiet and growing friction. Romulus, the more serious and strategic of the two, favoured the high and easily defensible Palatine Hill as the site for the new city. Remus, more impulsive and perhaps more egalitarian, favoured the neighbouring Aventine Hill. Their argument grew, but they were men of a pious and ancient age, and they agreed that this was a decision that could not be made by a simple argument or a test of strength. It was a decision that belonged to the gods. They would perform a sacred augury, a ritual of divination, to determine which of them the heavens had chosen to be the founder and the king. Each brother would go to his favoured hill. He would mark out a sacred and ritually pure space, and he would keep a long and patient vigil, watching the sky for a sign, for a flight of sacred birds that would reveal the will of the gods. Let us imagine the scene. It is the deep and silent hour just before the dawn. The world is a canvas of soft, deep greys, the air cool and heavy with dew. Remus has ascended the Aventine hill, and Romulus, the Palatine. They are alone, each in his own sacred and silent space, their followers waiting with a hushed and anxious anticipation at the foot of the hills. The two brothers, who have been inseparable for their entire lives, are now separated by a valley and by the immense and heavy weight of a crown that does not yet exist. They turn their faces to the eastern sky and they wait. The minutes stretch into an hour, and the silence is a deep and almost unbearable thing. And then, a cry of triumph goes up from the Aventine hill. Remus has seen his sign, a flight of 6 magnificent vultures, the great and sacred birds of omen, is circling in the sky above him. It is a powerful and undeniable sign. He is the chosen one. His followers begin to cheer, and a messenger is sent running across the valley to inform Romulus that the contest is over. But as the messenger arrives, breathless, at the foot of the Palatine hill, a new and even greater shout goes up from Romulus and his followers. For in that very moment, a second and even more powerful omen has appeared in the sky above Romulus. It is not a flight of 6 vultures, but a great and magnificent flock of 12, a perfect and divine doubling of his brother's sign. And now, the will of the gods, which should have been so clear, is a new and bitter source of argument. Remus and his followers claim that he is the rightful king, for he saw his sign first. But Romulus and his party argue that his own later sign is the more powerful and more significant one. For the number 12 is a number of immense and sacred power. The ambiguity of the omen has not resolved their conflict. It has only deepened it, and it has given each man a divine justification for his own claim to power. But in this new and dangerous rivalry, it is Romulus, the more serious, the more determined, and perhaps the more ruthless of the two, who prevails. He declares that the gods have spoken clearly, that the greater number is the greater sign, and that he, and he alone, is the chosen founder and the king. The contest is over. Romulus, his claim now asserted and backed by the more powerful of the two divine signs, now prepares to perform the ancient and sacred ritual of founding his city. This is not a simple act of construction. It is a profound and magical act of creation, a ritual that will separate the sacred space of the city from the profane and common world that surrounds it. Let us imagine the scene at the foot of the Palatine hill. Romulus yokes a pair of pure white cattle, a bull and a cow, to a magnificent plough with a blade of polished bronze. He is dressed in the robes of a priest, and as he begins to drive the animals forward, the bronze ploughshare bites deep into the rich, dark earth. He begins to plough a single deep and continuous furrow, a great and perfect circle that will enclose the entire hill. This is the sulcus primigenius, the first and most sacred furrow. The earth that is turned up by the plough is thrown to the inside, and it will form the base of the city's first, simple, earthen wall. This furrow is not just a line in the dirt, it is a magical and religious boundary, the pomerium, a line that is now and forever sacred and inviolable. As Romulus performs this solemn and sacred task, his followers watch in a reverent silence. But one person does not. His brother Remus, his heart a cold and heavy stone of bitter jealousy and of resentment, now approaches. He has been defeated in the contest of the gods. His own claims to kingship have been dismissed, and he now looks upon his brother's sacred and solemn work with a deep and burning contempt. And in a final, fateful, and tragically foolish act of defiance, he decides to show exactly what he thinks of his brother's new and sacred boundary. He walks up to the small, newly ploughed earthen wall, a wall that is barely a foot high, and with a mocking and contemptuous laugh he leaps over it. It is a childish and a petty act, born of a brotherly rivalry that has festered for too long, a reckless defiance of the solemnity of the moment. But in the context of this sacred and ancient ritual, the drawing of the pomerium, the hallowed boundary of a new city, It is the most profound and terrible of all possible sacrileges. He has violated the sacred integrity of the city at the very moment of its birth, defiling its nascent sanctity with a careless act of insolence. He has shown in a single foolish leap his contempt for the will of the gods, who had guided their miraculous survival and brought them to this very spot. For the authority of his brother, the chosen leader and planner of this great enterprise, and for the very sanctity of the city itself, the future heart of an empire yet to be imagined. The reaction from Romulus is instantaneous, terrible, and absolute. The sacred and solemn ritual has been profaned, its spiritual fabric rent by an act of hubris, and there is only one possible and unforgiving response. The weight of divine will and the future of their nascent city converge upon him, demanding an ultimate sacrifice for the transgression. In a flash of righteous and terrible anger, fueled by an understanding of the profound implications of Remus's act, he turns on his brother. The specifics of the legend are clouded and dark, shrouded in the mists of antiquity and conflicting accounts. Some say that Romulus himself, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, struck his brother down with the very spade he was carrying. The tool used to mark the sacred furrow now turned into an instrument of fratricide. Others say that he cried out to one of his loyal followers, a devoted warrior named Chella or a similarly unnamed soldier, who then, without hesitation, killed Remus with a sword, acting on the implicit command of his leader. But the result, regardless of the precise method, is tragically the same. Remus, the joyful and impulsive twin, the boy who was saved by the she-wolf and nurtured by a shepherd, now lies dead at his brother's feet, his life extinguished in a brutal instant. His blood, a vibrant crimson stain, is the first to be spilled in the new city, a dark and terrible mark on the fresh and sacred earth of its foundation, a grim omen for its future. A deep and terrible silence falls over the assembled crowd. The joyful and hopeful act of creation, meant to usher in an era of prosperity and glory, has, in a single and shocking moment, been transformed into a dark and sorrowful tragedy. The air, once vibrant with anticipation, now hangs heavy with the weight of death and regret. Romulus stands over the still and silent body of his own twin brother, the man who had been his other half for his entire life, their destinies intertwined since birth, now irrevocably severed. And as he looks at what he has done, at the ultimate price paid for a moment of disrespect, he speaks the words that will echo through time, becoming the first and most terrible law of his new city, a chilling declaration of its uncompromising spirit. "So shall perish," he says, his voice a low and terrible whisper, resonating with a mixture of grief and unyielding resolve. "Any other who dares to leap over my walls." The great and terrible sacrifice has been made. The city has been founded not just on the will of the gods, their divine favor a guiding hand in its destiny, but on the blood of a brother, a grim foundation laid in fratricide. And in this single, tragic, and foundational act, the dual and contradictory nature of the city of Rome is born, a paradox that will define its very essence for centuries to come. It will forever be a city of divine destiny, blessed by the heavens and guided by omens, and simultaneously a city of a brutal and pragmatic violence, willing to shed blood for its survival and expansion. It will be a city of sacred laws, meticulously crafted and rigorously enforced, and of a ruthless and conquering ambition, relentlessly pursuing power and dominion. Romulus is now the sole founder and the first king, his name inextricably linked to the birth of this formidable power, but he is a lonely king, a ruler whose great and magnificent destiny, the creation of an eternal city, is now forever and inextricably bound to the deep and sorrowful shadow of the brother he has lost, a constant reminder of the terrible cost of his ambition and the bloody origins of Rome. Romulus, his claim now asserted and backed by the more powerful of the two divine signs, now prepares to perform the ancient and sacred ritual of founding his city. This is not a simple act of construction. It is a profound and magical act of creation. a ritual that will separate the sacred space of the city from the profane and common world that surrounds it. Let us imagine the scene at the foot of the Palatine Hill. Romulus yokes a pair of pure white cattle, a bull and a cow, to a magnificent plough with a blade of polished bronze. He is dressed in the robes of a priest, and as he begins to drive the animals forward, the bronze ploughshare bites deep into the rich, dark earth. He begins to plough a single deep and continuous furrow, a great and perfect circle that will enclose the entire hill. This is the sulcus primigenius, the first and most sacred furrow. The earth that is turned up by the plough is thrown to the inside, and it will form the base of the city's first, simple, earthen wall. This furrow is not just a line in the dirt, it is a magical and religious boundary, the pomerium, a line that is now and forever sacred and inviolable. As Romulus performs this solemn and sacred task, his followers watch in a reverent silence. But one person does not. His brother Remus, his heart a cold and heavy stone of bitter jealousy and of resentment, now approaches. He has been defeated in the contest of the gods. His own claims to kingship have been dismissed, and he now looks upon his brother's sacred and solemn work with a deep and burning contempt. And in a final, fateful, and tragically foolish act of defiance, he decides to show exactly what he thinks of his brother's new and sacred boundary. He walks up to the small, newly ploughed earthen wall, a wall that is barely a foot high, and with a mocking and contemptuous laugh he leaps over it. It is a childish and a petty act, born of a brotherly rivalry that has festered for too long, a reckless defiance of the solemnity of the moment. But in the context of this sacred and ancient ritual, the drawing of the pomerium, the hallowed boundary of a new city, it is the most profound and terrible of all possible sacrileges. He has violated the sacred integrity of the city at the very moment of its birth, defiling its nascent sanctity with a careless act of insolence. He has shown in a single foolish leap his contempt for the will of the gods, who had guided their miraculous survival and brought them to this very spot. For the authority of his brother, the chosen leader and planner of this great enterprise, and for the very sanctity of the city itself, the future heart of an empire yet to be imagined. The reaction from Romulus is instantaneous, terrible, and absolute. The sacred and solemn ritual has been profaned, its spiritual fabric rent by an act of hubris, and there is only one possible and unforgiving response. The weight of divine will and the future of their nascent city converge upon him, demanding an ultimate sacrifice for the transgression. In a flash of righteous and terrible anger, fueled by an understanding of the profound implications of Remus's act, he turns on his brother. The specifics of the legend are clouded and dark, shrouded in the mists of antiquity and conflicting accounts. Some say that Romulus himself, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, struck his brother down with the very spade he was carrying. The tool used to mark the sacred furrow now turned into an instrument of fratricide. Others say that he cried out to one of his loyal followers, a devoted warrior named Cella or a similarly unnamed soldier, who then, without hesitation, killed Remus with a sword, acting on the implicit command of his leader. But the result, regardless of the precise method, is tragically the same. Remus, the joyful and impulsive twin, the boy who was saved by the she-wolf and nurtured by a shepherd, now lies dead at his brother's feet, his life extinguished in a brutal instant. His blood, a vibrant crimson stain, is the first to be spilled in the new city, a dark and terrible mark on the fresh and sacred earth of its foundation, a grim omen for its future. A deep and terrible silence falls over the assembled crowd. The joyful and hopeful act of creation, meant to usher in an era of prosperity and glory, has, in a single and shocking moment, been transformed into a dark and sorrowful tragedy. The air, once vibrant with anticipation, now hangs heavy with the weight of death and regret. Romulus stands over the still and silent body of his own twin brother, the man who had been his other half for his entire life, their destinies intertwined since birth, now irrevocably severed. And as he looks at what he has done, at the ultimate price paid for a moment of disrespect. He speaks the words that will echo through time, becoming the first and most terrible law of his new city, a chilling declaration of its uncompromising spirit. "So shall perish," he says, his voice a low and terrible whisper, resonating with a mixture of grief and unyielding resolve. "Any other who dares to leap over my walls." The great and terrible sacrifice has been made. The city has been founded not just on the will of the gods, their divine favor a guiding hand in its destiny, but on the blood of a brother, a grim foundation laid in fratricide. And in this single, tragic, and foundational act, the dual and contradictory nature of the city of Rome is born, a paradox that will define its very essence for centuries to come. It will forever be a city of divine destiny, blessed by the heavens and guided by omens, and simultaneously a city of a brutal and pragmatic violence, willing to shed blood for its survival and expansion. It will be a city of sacred laws, meticulously crafted and rigorously enforced, and of a ruthless and conquering ambition, relentlessly pursuing power and dominion. Romulus is now the sole founder and the first king, his name inextricably linked to the birth of this formidable power. But he is a lonely king, a ruler whose great and magnificent destiny, the creation of an eternal city, is now forever and inextricably bound to the deep and sorrowful shadow of the brother he has lost, a constant reminder of the terrible cost of his ambition and the bloody origins of Rome. Romulus, now alone, turns to the great and difficult task of building his city. He declares his new settlement on the Palatine Hill a sanctuary, a place of refuge for the landless, the outcasts, and the ambitious from all the surrounding kingdoms. And they come, drawn by the promise of a new beginning, and from this strange and motley collection of runaways and of adventurers, a new and hardy and powerful people, the Roman people, is born. The story of the twin brothers is the great and foundational myth of Rome, a story that is more than just a legend. It is a deep and profound psychological portrait of the civilization that it created. For the city of Rome, which would one day grow to become the master of the entire known world, would always carry within it the dual and contradictory nature of its two founders. It would have the stern, serious, and law-giving spirit of its founder, Romulus. But it would also always be haunted by the ghost of the brother he had killed, by the wild, impulsive, and defiant spirit of Remus. The she-wolf, the looper, would remain the eternal symbol of the city, a perfect and powerful image of a mother who is both fiercely nurturing and a wild and dangerous predator.